Okay, so it's just after 11 now, and although there are still some people joining, I think we should get started on time. So thank you everybody for joining this webinar on the ExCALIBUR Exascale project. We've got two speakers today. First of all, we're going to hear from Richard Gunn, who's the head of e-infrastructure at UKAEA EPSRC, and he's going to give us an overview of the ExCALIBUR program. After that, we're going to hear from Jeremy Yates at UCL, who's going to talk a bit particularly about the hardware and software enabling part of ExCALIBUR, and also mention a bit, I think, about the software projects that have recently been funded. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Richard and let him start his bit of the presentation. So one thing I should say is, please, we'll have a break in between the two sessions briefly to allow people to ask questions for Richard, because he might need to escape a bit earlier before the end of the session. So if you've got any questions for Richard, there'll be a chance to ask at the end of his part of the presentation. Okay, thank you, Richard. You can take over now if you want.
Thanks very much, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see the numbers kind of ticking up in the corner of my screen. So as you'll see from the slide, my kind of job title, my day job really is EPSRC focused, but I'm going to take my EPSRC hat off for a moment and talk about ExCALIBUR, which is a new UKAEA-wide program focused on exascale computing. So in this presentation, you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to present too many slides. There's chance for discussion. But I'd like to say a bit about the context, vision and importance of the ExCALIBUR program within what's known as the Strategic Priorities Fund, the SPF. I'd like to say a bit about the structure of the ExCALIBUR program and the planned activities. And then I think Jeremy will provide some more detail on the hardware and enabling software part of the program. And finally, I think this is a really good opportunity to share and discuss opportunities for the RSE community and how they can get involved and shape this program. So to set the scene, the first thing I wanted to do was introduce the Strategic Priorities Fund, the SPF, which is the pot of funding that is funding the ExCALIBUR program. And this is part of a £7 billion investment in 2017 that went to UKAEA as part of the government's National Productivity Investment Fund. This slide gives you a brief breakdown of where the National Productivity Investment Fund investments within UKAEA sit. So you can see there's a whole range of different pots of funding here, funding all sorts of activities, all the way from regional growth through the Strength in Places Fund, international collaboration, the Industrial Strategies Challenge Fund, ISCF, which many of you will be familiar with, talent and skills investments, and finally the SPF, the Strategic Priorities Fund. Now, some of you may remember, before UKAEA was founded, Sir Paul Nurse reviewed the research councils, and a key part of that review was to develop what Paul Nurse called a common fund. So this was a new investment to support high quality multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research programs. And there was a view that at the time these were being missed between the traditional funding remits of the councils. So the SPF was set up in 2018 by UKAEA to counter that. And the SPF has three objectives. And I think it's very important when you're considering how to engage with the ExCALIBUR program. This is not a typical UKAEA council baseline program, so you need to bear these three objectives in mind. The three objectives, as you can see on the screen, are to support high quality multi and interdisciplinary research and innovation, to link up effectively with government research and innovation priorities, and finally to ensure that the system responds to strategic priorities and opportunities in emerging areas. Hopefully you'll see in these slides how ExCALIBUR is proposing to do that. So the SPF portfolio now has 34 different programs with a combined investment of around 830 million. So for those of you paying attention, you'll see that's a considerably bigger number to the one that was presented in the initial slides. And that's because SPF funding isn't just allocated to UKAEA, it comes through government departments as well. So ExCALIBUR is one of these SPF SPF programs. It was awarded 45.7 million of SPF funding in 2019. And it's a partnership between the UKAEA councils led through EPSRC and what we call public sector research establishments, PSREs, led by the Met Office, but also involving the UK Atomic Energy Authority to harness the power of exascale high performance computing. So as I said, this programme is structured a bit differently to other UKAEA programmes. So at the top level, there's an ExCALIBUR programme board, which is jointly chaired by representatives of the Met Office and UKAEA. Beneath that, we have what we call the delivery groups. So these are the leads within the different agencies of the different programmes who are kind of pulling this thing all together and developing the activities. And these activities are jointly run by the Met Office and UKAEA. So EPSRC is leading activities on behalf of the UKAEA councils, and the Met Office is leading activities on behalf of PSREs. And these activities, again, are not typical calls, so they take different forms. They can be strategically managed activities, such as you see from the Research Council Challenge programmes, infrastructure investments, and also directed research within the PSREs. Finally, ExCALIBUR has a steering committee. Hopefully we'll get some web pages up on that soon. They had the first meeting a couple of weeks ago. And they're really there to advise the programme board and in turn the delivery group and make sure that the ExCALIBUR programme on the one hand is fulfilling the aims of the SPF, and on the other hand is moving towards a coherent approach between the different agencies. So this was my attempt to define the ExCALIBUR programme on one slide. The programme has three major objectives. They're quite simple. Efficiency, by which we mean that the UK science base has codes that are optimised for exascale computing. Capability, which is really about how those exascale codes can lead to new and open up new forms of research. And also expertise, and in particular putting RSE career development at the centre of this programme. So to achieve those three objectives, there are four cross-cutting design pillars, you might call them, that underpin all of the activities in the programme. They're separation of concerns, co-design between mathematicians, domain scientists and computer scientists, data science, so taking into account the new workflows that we'll have to develop when we move to the exascale, and investing in people, so making sure that career development is a key part of all of the activities we develop. So this slide captures what benefits we hope to achieve by the time this programme concludes after 5 years. So in terms of efficiency, that the UK science base has access to exascale codes and is using them to develop both increased scientific output but also new services within the public sector. In terms of capability, we're looking to make sure that academia and industry have access to exascale high performance simulation codes and are using those to bring in new areas of science, new areas of capability. And in terms of expertise, making sure that we've trained up and developed the careers of a cohort of interdisciplinary RSEs. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. In terms of the structure of the programme, we have 5 different work packages. So you'll see on the right-hand side, some of these are being led by UKAEA, some are being led by the Met Office, and some are a partnership between the two. The first two I have some more slides on, so I won't talk about in detail, but there's as you can see, there's a work package around RSE knowledge integration and also what we refer to as high priority use cases, and I'll talk about those in a minute. There's also an emerging requirements work package. So this will be, this takes place in years 2 and 3 of the programme, and this is looking at perhaps areas that we see high impact of exascale computing but haven't perhaps been engaged with the development of exascale HPC from the start of the programme. So this is really to catalyse those new areas. There's also a large cross-cutting research strand, which we're starting to scope at the moment. So this is looking at underpinning techniques that go beyond any particular research community or technology platform. And finally, the hardware and enabling software programme, which Jeremy will talk about shortly. So the RSE knowledge integration work package is something we're scoping at the moment. The aim of this is really to develop the careers of research software engineers and to make sure that those research software engineers are kind of really the kind of binding force of this program. So making sure that the program works as a kind of coherent package of activities, and are really at the center of making sure that the program is delivering for the needs of the research communities in the UK. We're looking at building and evolving training curriculum, so looking at how we use the program as a platform to develop some of those skills within the existing RSE base and grow that RSE base. We're looking at various aspects as well of training courses and other technology platforms for RSE career development. In terms of high priority use cases, so you'll see that these are taken a slightly different form between the Met Office activities and the UKAEA activities, given the different missions of those organisations. On the UKAEA side, we've defined a high priority use case as having certain characteristics, and hopefully you can see how these link to the earlier slides that define the objectives of the Strategic Priorities Fund overall. So at the moment, we're defining high priority use cases as those that enable high quality, high impact research in multiple areas of strategic importance. So trying to encourage multi and interdisciplinary working in high impact areas. We define a high priority use case as providing a step change in simulation performance when we move to the Exascale, but also solutions that scale and can be applied across a range of architectures. And finally, to us, a high priority use case is one that provides a national and international focal point for the relevant research communities. So that includes potential international collaborations that will through the course of this programme. So the Met Office and UKAEA use cases are taking a slightly different track. They are directed to weather and climate prediction and fusion modelling, respectively, as you'd expect from those organisations. The initial UKAEA activities launched in April 2020, and I think looking at the names of the participants in this seminar, many of you will have been involved in those activities. We've called them Design and Development Working Groups. So these are 15-month awards that really have two main objectives. One is to develop proof of concept activities for the development of the high priority use cases, so codes, software, algorithms, etc. And the other is to build the communities in those areas and bring in people that perhaps need to be involved in this but haven't perhaps quite been involved to the level that, that we'd expect to see in a few years' time. So it's kind of seeding the development of those communities. However, it's very important to say that this is just the beginning for ExCALIBUR. So there are two further phases of use cases that are due to launch. One in about a year's time, and another phase in April 22. So if you haven't been involved in the design and development working group so far, I think my take-home message from this seminar was please continue to look out on the UKAEA website. We are intending to launch a range of community engagement activities and workshops over the coming months, and the successful working groups are also developing a whole series of events to engage their communities. So keep an eye on that. I think that was it for me in terms of slides. I realised one of the things I haven't done in these slides is provide contact details, so I think there'll be a bit of time for discussion now, but if anyone wants to get in touch, they can direct those queries to me. My email address is standard UKAEA format, and someone from the team will get back to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So Richard may have to leave before the very end of this webinar session. So if anybody has any questions that they particularly want to aim at Richard, I think now is the time to do that. We'll have a bit of time before Jeremy starts. Yes, Phil, you have a question? Do you want to type it or say it?
I can say it, if that's all right. So I noticed the pre-announcement for the RSE Fellowship call went out yesterday. How does that join up with ExCALIBUR? Or does it join up with ExCALIBUR?
So, formally speaking, that is a separate activity that's funded through the EPSRC baseline program. I think, obviously it's the base in this country, is not huge. So one of the things that I think we're very conscious of in ExCALIBUR is to kind of build on what we've already got rather than recreate various frameworks. I think in terms of the working group activities, those will take quite a discrete form based on either particular technology solutions or use communities. I think when you get into the kind of cross-cutting strand that we're scoping at the moment, then you perhaps can see some quite close links with the RSE program. But that's something we're thinking about as we develop those additional strands of the program.
Thank you.
What I think we don't want to do is kind of displace activities already going on. So, we're very mindful that the RSE community is not huge and only has a certain amount of time to commit.
Thanks, Richard. David, you've put your hand up. You have a question?
Yeah. So the way things seem to have panned out, UKAEA have funded maybe about twice as many working groups as the original call by putting quite a lot more money into that stage than was originally announced. But that isn't going to magic up more money at later stages. So is the expectation that phase 2 is going to be spread more thinly, or the expectation that you're going to cull half the working groups into phase 2?
So in terms of the, yes, we did spend more on the working groups than perhaps was envisaged in the call document. There were two main reasons for that. One, I think just the sheer number of high quality bids the panel were really impressed by. So we did fund a few more than perhaps originally envisaged. I think the second reason is, given all of the COVID related delays, the financial profiles for this are looking quite complex. So actually it may not be as much of an overspend as was originally envisaged. Yeah, so phase 2, we are going to put out some details on that shortly on what the process looks like for moving to phase 2. I think we'd always envisaged, I wouldn't necessarily say culling working groups, but reconfiguring working groups depending on what they achieve in the first year. So you can imagine perhaps some merging of different working groups, some new groups being integrated. Potentially we could lose some working groups at that stage, depending on what the panel advise us to do.
There was also a question in the chat, Richard, from Michael, who was asking about what has been funded already.
I have a slide on that.
Okay. Yeah, Jeremy. Okay, so Richard, do you want to say anything, or are you happy to leave that one for Jeremy to explain in his presentation?
I'll leave that to Jeremy. We are working on a better website. Apologies, things are quite hard to find at the moment, but if people go onto the EPSRC grants on the web database, they can find details of all the successful projects funded in that.
Okay, I can't see any more hands up or any more questions at the moment, so I'll thank Richard again for his presentation. I will move to Jeremy Yates, who's going to give a bit more of an overview of the hardware and software enabling part of ExCALIBUR. So over to you, Jeremy.
Hello, everybody. Just to make Richard's point that this is indeed a UKAEA project. Sorry, even I went out then. So this is a UKAEA project, and here's a nice corporate slide for you all. I'm going to talk about ExCALIBUR with an algorithmic approach to exascale design, and I've been helped with this. I've been helped by Simon McIntosh Smith, who's the joint lead of the ExCALIBUR hardware and enabling software program, along with me, and also by Rob Akers, who's head of scientific computing at the Cullum Centre for Fusion Research and UKAEA. So this, I think, makes the point quite nice. actually of the kind of not only cross council but cross domain nature of ExCALIBUR. You've got me, a Diraka, you've got Simon, who's well known for Archer and Tier 2, and you've got Rob from UKAEA. So we really are all working together, and it's been quite a delight to actually work with colleagues on a project like this. So the structure of the talk, a framework, and that's a theme that runs through many of the successful proposals, and so I decided to kind of adopt the same language, and I will talk briefly about what is an algorithmic approach to computer design. There are some radical approaches to this, which I'll touch on verbally. One of the things I want to get across, though, is that what I really want to see coming out of this is an RSC ResOps alliance, effectively, because it'll be those two communities will be doing the heavy lifting and dare I say the heavy thinking about this. I'll talk about the role of the hardware and enabling software program in actually enabling and driving this. Think about what separation of concerns in practice means. This is a new phrase to me. I just thought that we wrote subroutines or which shows my age or functions or whatever, or libraries to abstract out. But it is well worth looking at this again, particularly in light of a couple of what the proposals want to do. I'll go through the projects and I'll put deep dive, it should really say shallow dive, into two of them. But just to give you all a flavour of what these projects are thinking about. A list of issues that jump out at me from the enabling software kind of side of things. I will go through that, and then at the end I will do a work of I'll give a word from UKAEA, where we're actually looking at a particular problem and the kind of calls that they want to make to actually help solve that problem. So ExCALIBUR is a UK initiative. I wonder who dreamt this up, but ExCALIBUR stands for Exascale Computing Algorithms and Infrastructures Benefiting UK Research. So it's algorithms, computing algorithms, infrastructures, kind of hardware and enabling software and stuff like that, and how it benefits UK research. And it's as Richard's already said, it's a strategic priorities fund led by Met Office, UKAEA, and UK Research and Innovation, and it's designed to deliver innovative algorithmic development. And will be delivered over 5 years. And there are a set of activities. I've just been told it was Rob who came up with ExCALIBUR. Okay, I'm not surprised by that. So a knowledge integration activity, which is basically sharing our knowledge around, particularly around groups such as the RSC community, but also the wider computer science and computational science communities. Look at these very high priority use cases. Yeah, if we need to invert 10 million by 10 million matrices, just how are we going to do that? Supporting the emerging requirements for high performance algorithms. You know, if you're trying to build an algorithm to solve a 10 million by 10 million matrix to diagonalize and invert that and so on, can the hardware we currently have actually do it? Can the enabling software such as MPI, can that actually do it? So that there are some kind of fundamental, deep fundamental questions that we have to ask, and we always have to remember that we are constrained by the functional performance of hardware as well. And I think that has to be remembered, and this is one of the key knowledge integration pieces, is to make people aware of just what the hardware can do, and also to actually let people play with and do research kind of projects on hardware that can at least serve as an analog for, or surrogate for, what they want to do. Cross-cutting research. There's, if you just read through all the proposals, there is an awful lot of cross-cutting research, things in one area that can be repurposed for other in other areas, and also looking at the proof of concept hardware, the hardware and enabling software program. This began as a hardware program, but I quickly turned it into an enabling software program. Okay. The algorithmic approach, it has this means that it has to be derived from activities. So when we were thinking of how to define what we meant by Exascale, we decided that we would think only in terms of activity, and so we would avoid falling into traps around exascale, petascale, terascale, octascale, and all that kind of malarkey, and just think about things in terms of problem sets and how we try and solve problems that are 10 to 1,000 times larger than we solve at present, 10 to 1,000 times faster than at present. We have to realize that many of our workflows now contain simulation, data modeling, and to some extent are data driven. They contain all those components, as well as, you know, just the straightforward things that we're perhaps doing at the moment. But increasingly, all three of these are coming into play, and that's recognized in several of the proposals, of the successful proposals. They can come from all areas of research and innovation, and as is suggested in the first two bullet points, exascale velocity is just as important an output as exascale volume. Although I would kind of like to use the word momentum and mass, it seems that I'm too late to kind of insist on those. And it's these actually that are the fundamental drivers, the informal contextual drivers of algorithmic design, is the problems that we're trying to solve. Okay. So what's the role of the hardware and enabling software program? Well, we've had UKAEA, Met Office and UKAEA software development calls. The working groups are being set up, or particular jobs of work now have to be done. And part of the main thing is to create communities of interest around key applications and algorithms. And all of you on here are potential members of communities of interest. And I would posit that the RSCs are one of the most important communities that ExCALIBUR will have to work with and recruit you as members and so on. So your role is key to the success of this project, which is why we took the opportunity to come and talk to you as soon as we could, as soon as we have, in a sense, something to offer and tell you about. Sorry, I forgot the third one, which the other reason is to allow you the opportunity to help shape the program. That's really important, and that is probably the most important thing that I will say to you is that your input is welcome to help us shape this program. So what's the hardware and enabling software program? It's £4.5 million in capital fundware, and it's hardware foresighting system. We'll be looking for industry co-funding for the program, and we've actually begun that process. That's one of the most important things we've done over the last week. We've actually begun to talk to industry about how they can help. And what we'd like to do is provide testbed areas that use pre-commercial equipment for software prototyping and development. And the two main purposes are enable the software community, i.e. you, to be ready to use commercial products effectively as soon as they come on the market, but also provide the UKRI community, i.e. you, with the ability to influence the technology industry and get that necessary knowledge and generate that necessary knowledge to guide their purchase decisions. And this double-pronged approach, although it's going to be messy to deliver and messy to manage, maybe manage is the wrong word, but coordinate or you know, align or herd even, will give UK researchers a competitive advantage internationally. The benefit and impacts, what we want to end up with is that we'd actually like the algorithmic design and algorithmic generation, software generation, to enhance our exploitation of the existing hardware, as well as supporting a new Exascale software development roadmap for the UK. Lower the bar, right? We actually want many more groups and areas participating in co-design projects. We want to prepare for future technology developments and ensure that the ExCALIBUR code base is able to take full advantage of these to deliver the science program. And the strategic benefit to the ExCALIBUR program is actually that it gets a co-design activity working in the UK, and it maintains the confidence of our industry partners, particularly post-Brexit, that the UK is interested in this area. For some context, the UK was actually quite an active member of all the Horizon 2020 Exascale projects, and actually gathering them and those projects into ExCALIBUR has been a key activity over the last few months. So, how are we organised? Below the dashed line is ExCALIBUR. Above the is the hardware and enabling software project, and above the dashed line is the rest. The key things to realise is we've got software projects over here, so these are the working groups and things. Down here we have a delivery board which is chaired by Simon McIntosh-Smith. We've got a technical working group which is chaired by John Taylor from Square Kilometre Array. We're setting up a benchmarking project as a standalone activity because it's the most important thing that we'll do actually. And this is the technology providers panel, which is the industry. So we'll be working with them. But the key thing that we do is we fund these projects, these hardware and enabling software projects, and these have to interact with all the software projects. And it's an RSC-led interaction. So this line here, which I hope you can see on the far right, is the most important line. It's the most important thing, is that the hardware and enabling software projects will be funding RSCs for the duration of the project, and it's those RSCs who will be working on their own projects, but also with the software projects as well. So this is the most important interaction that we've got to get going over the next 2 to 3 months. The benchmarking committee, Simon has set us the challenge of benchmarking systems that don't exist yet, and turn benchmarking into a predictive and design orientated activity, as well as something that we use to measure performance. So setting ourselves the task of being able to benchmark systems that don't yet exist. We very much view our systems as analogues for Exascale. One of the things that we are doing is designing new methods to link application performance to system performance, and that's a big piece of work that we have to do over the summer. We'll obviously be making use of synthetics, mini apps, and actually the application set. But the other thing to realise is that we're going to have a program from the very off, so that all our outputs are curated and therefore discoverable and published, and they'll be published and be discoverable. And this is a key part of the knowledge in integration. So this is kind of a slide on separation of concerns in practice, and it kind of describes very much my own life as an expert in radiative transfer and photon transport methods. The idea of separation of concerns obviously is that the maths of a problem is separate from its implementation. I used to teach this actually way back in the day, and obviously you kind of write down the maths and so then you need algorithms, so you have to make the maths manifest in terms of computational procedures. And looking back, this should lead us to a consideration of system characteristics. In the ExCALIBUR context, this leads us to co-design, which is that holistic collaborative design by mathematicians, domain scientists, computer scientists, and industrial partners. And that is a key activity of the hardware and enabling software program. And we are then going to make sure that we share that with the rest of you. And just to make it clear, and again, this came out very strongly from the proposals, the programming language is as much a part of the system design as anything else. I was delighted to see some really nice proposals on what people want to do. You've also got to deal with, we also have to deal with the new workflows. We have to manage and analyze the vast volumes of simulation data. That is something that we're already hitting in Dirac, and it hurts very hard. Okay, and this is something that we're going to have to work out how to do. So Alistair's on this call, and Alistair Basden, he's thinking hard about this, and others. This is something that we're really going to have to get a grip on. And then around the loop we go, iterating until we converge. Sorry, I've been iterating for the best part of 30 years, so I can't help but say that. All of this requires investment in people, whether it's interdisciplinary RSE, such as yourselves, but also this new area of research operations, the people who are the link between the software and the systems. Again, in the hardware and enabling software projects, I've ensured investment not only in RSCs, but also in result support as well. That's just as important. And it's that alliance that I want to see being brought into existence in a semi-formalized way, and so on. So a list of software working group projects, and you've got the PI organization and the grant title. I've actually done the full list of organizations where I can, and if I just go through them, so there's Edinburgh leads on Element, which is Exascale mesh networking. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. You've got Scott, who's on this call, leading the materials and molecular modeling exascale design and development working group. So big matrices and other things like Fourier transforms and things like that. You've got Ham, who is leading a really nice project, and I'll go into detail about this, which is GenX, which is the ExCALIBUR working group on David Ham. That's it, yes. And he and his people and his working group are looking at a really nice framework for exascale computing continuum mechanics through code generation, and this is really good one. We've then got a proposal from UCL in Cambridge on exascale computing for system-led engineering design, testing, optimization, and resilience. This is making simulation real, i.e. as real as a measurement. That's kind of one of the benefits of exascale we hope to get, is that this simulation we get can be as trusted as much as a measurement. That's one of the key outputs of all of this. We've got Durham looking at massively parallel hydro for engineering and astrophysics. we've got Jayan and others, including me, looking at benchmarking for AI at the Exascale. So this is an exciting project, taking the current AI frameworks and see how they might operate or not operate at the Exascale. We've got lattice field theory, which is Edinburgh are leading that, which is which is looking at their giant, and I mean they're already giant, but they're going to be even bigger sparse matrices that they have to solve to extract the wave functions that describe the subatomic world. And then we have Durham again, looking at the role of meshes and how you're solving PDEs. So there's another meshy one. GenX is another meshy one. So we've got how you're generating meshes is kind of a key theme here. We've got one from the particle physicists, from the high energy physicists, looking at this issue that I pointed out of data movement, organization, and access, because they do a lot of that. They do an awful lot of that explicitly. So they've got a good mindset that we can tap into. And finally, we've got turbulent flow. Turbulent flow, we're always saying we're going to get to the bottom of it. Maybe Exascale will allow us to get to the bottom of it. And that's key because, again, it's turning simulation into science, which is actually a key phrase of the GenX project as well. Turning simulation into science, where we can trust what comes out as much as a measurement. And you need to get to Exascale to get to those length scales where we can say, yeah, that would happen in real life. I trust that kind of thing. Especially if I'm going to be flying in something that's modeled on it. So I'll just spend 4 minutes whizzing through the others, my other slides. So GenX, which is the working group on Exascale continuum. So it's solving PDEs, partial differential equations, and this requires looking at partial differential equations for large scale. We do some processes simply become impossible to solve. You simply get trapped because things aren't propagating across your grid quickly enough, which is an evil problem in radiative transfer. And will they need to be preconditioned, which is what we have to do in radiative transfer. So we've got that mathematics coming in there. It's what they call the outer loop, transforming simulation into science. Trust, and that's going to be obviously going to need to look at uncertainty quantifications. You need to know what your errors are. You need to know how trustworthy it is, and they're going to use multi-level Monte Carlo, which is a very good way of doing it, particularly with the computer architectures that we have at present. Data analysis and visualization, right? You're going to need to know how your simulation is proceeding and analyzing what's coming off it. You might want to steer it, or you might want to see if it's any good, right? Bifurcation analysis. Unfortunately, there are several solutions to PDEs. We use lots of tricks to get the right one. Maybe we've got to throw those tricks away. Maybe we can throw those tricks away now. Their design approach, is achieving separation of concerns, and they're looking at composability and co-generation. And this is a really exciting thing about this particular project, and the idea of them building APIs for functions. So you can use your framework to construct codes that will operate at Exascale from these basis set of functions. And these are the kind of codes that they'll be looking at. So FireDrake, the Oxford Parallel Libraries, which already scale very well. PyFR, which is looking at flux reconstruction, which is something I'm interested in, and also this kind of domain-specific language idea and the code generation framework for finite solvers and other things. This is the really nice thing that I think this project will be doing. Oh, Mark's left. Mark Parsons has left because he's the PI of Element. So Exascale mesh network. This is a really exciting one, looking at computational fluid dynamics, structural engineering, biomechanics, and even astrophysics. I like the way Mark says even astrophysics. Sorry, I'm an astrophysicist. Distributed representation of the CAD system. I think, and that for me sums this up, is this kind of linking it to realness, linking it to measure, linking simulation to measurement, so that the two become not quite indistinguishable, but on the same level. And so this beautiful distributed representation, that's key, because one of the huge bottlenecks in all of this is the way we generate our meshes serially. And we have to get away from that. And that's going to be one of the most important things that we have to solve, is the whole idea of distributing our meshes, updating them, reconfiguring them on the fly and in parallel. That is going to be one of the most hardest things that we have to face. And the Element project is very, very much about that. And so I've done a bit of a whistle-stop tour of 2 projects, but I'm hoping you can see what the flavour is of what 2 of these projects want to do. And in a sense, there are similar flavours in the others. But I think it's very important that you get that kind of flavour. So what are we doing? Well, we had to spend our money quickly, and unfortunately in year 1. So we've set up an intercept testing facility at UCL, which is comprises an adaptable cluster. We're setting up something to look at storage and RAM, i.e. data movement and manipulation at Durham. And so Alistair and Tobias are kind of involved in that. We're also going to fund 4 more projects, sorry, 4, maybe 5 more projects quite soon. We're at the moment redefining those in terms of what the first 10 software projects have proposed. So you can see we're actually looking at, we're actually looking at the whole idea of what the processor unit accelerator interaction is, and we're looking at file systems and how well they might work or not work, and we're looking at the APIs themselves, the sickles of this world and things like that. A list of issues, what's jumped out of me: data management, organization and access. I don't think that's quite there yet. Sickle type, cross-platform abstraction layers for portability. Are they any good? Do they really support architectural diversity? Again, you'll see there is a project there that looks at it. One of the things that concerns me is, what about MPI or anything like it? Because when you push the industry, then, and we say, well, isn't that your problem? The response we're getting back at the moment is, well, no. So this whole how well MPI works at scale, we really do need to get a handle on that. How we'll work with you, as I say, we're going to be assigning RTs and ResOps to each of our projects. Benchmarking is a key activity, and Andy is going to be our coordinator or something higher. We bought our ARMForge to make it available to projects to use, so you can at least do debugging, optimization, and profiling at scale. And then we're going to talk to you through all these fora that Richard mentioned, so we can get your input into the project. This is the kind of thing that we're trying to solve. These are slides that Rob gave us, looking at fusion modeling. It's a really nasty problem, because it's a really nasty problem in astrophysics as well. Neutrals and plasma, and looking at turbulence. for the Exascale. It's nasty, whether it's a tomahawk or it's a rounder style. It really is quite a nasty problem, but Exascale should allow us to solve it. Rob asked me to put these up, and these are 7 planned calls that are imminent. Get in touch with Rob Akers, who will no doubt put his email address in the chat window. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, then please put them in the chat window or email me at j.a.yates@ucl.ac.uk. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for that. So we've got a bit of time left for questions and comments. So can you ask them? So there's one from Adrian straight away, actually. So I'd love to get access to the hardware enabling software prototype systems. Is there a mechanism for that?
There should be by the end of June. So one of the things, Adrian, you're at EPCC, aren't you? Yes. Well, actually, EPCC will actually be building their own H&ES project. We're just sorting that out with Mark at the moment. So you will actually be one of the venues for the for a H&ES project, and by virtue of that, you'll automatically have a right to use all the others when they come online and are online. One of the things that we are going to though be doing is advertising both these facilities, but also the next wave, the so-called third wave, as Simon calls it, in which we are going to kind of advertise a proper open call. So we're going to advertise what we've got so that people can apply to actually do things on them, but also we are but obviously the software projects get first dibs, but we're also going to be allowing you and others to actually bid in to actually build up your own H&ES program as well.
Thanks, Jeremy. So there was a question from Michelle, who's also EPCC, is asking, if the hardware already exists, can the process really be called co-design?
Depends where. I think there is system code design where we can put components together in a novel way, which we do a lot of. A couple of us are now actually doing, not many I admit, but a couple of us are now actually doing the kind of thing that Michelle is talking about, which is you're actually influencing the design of hardware before it comes to us. This is one of the main things I want out of the hardware of this program, is that by years 3 and 4, we're doing a fair few more of us are actually doing what Michelle talks about, and yeah.
Thanks,
and I'm hoping Michelle will guide us on that as well.
And Mark from Leeds also is asking about MPIs. Is that down to researchers' naive adoption of the safe small features, or not experimenting? Maybe more guidance is needed for coders who try to use large HPC. But he does admit that maybe there's a different forum for that.
Yeah, I think there's a different forum for that, but we have to have it in mind, and I think we do have to experiment. We have to try and experiment with what we've got, so we can build up our own RSC knowledge. I think that's going to be very important. I think it's incumbent upon people like you, Andy, to always bear this in mind, that we have to start pushing things as hard as we can with what we've got, just to see where the timeouts start dropping out, or to see where the bottlenecks are happening, just to see that MPI3 really does what it's meant to be doing. That kind of thing, and I would seriously welcome bids from any of you in the third wave to actually look at to do enabling software to actually look at the performance of MPI, because it is a deep concern of mine. When I do my gap analysis and I look at what people are going on about, and I was on an Intel Dell presentation and I asked about this, and I was in a cold sweat when I got the answer. It was not really our concern. I was really shocked by that. So
I think also, I mean, there's a lot of engagements of RSEs in this project, and one of the key roles of the RSEs is to push the skills, the software skills, for example, in using things like MPI out into the research community and assist them in using the best practices and understanding how they can use those tools at scale.
Yeah, and I think, Andy, again, people like you are in the van on this, and it'll be the RSE community that leads that, and I think it's well worthwhile. I mean, if you look at the influence of the UK on MPI design, it goes back a long time, and there are at least two institutions on this call who were key to that development. EPCC itself, and also Daresbury Laboratories. So again, this is something I think that we could take the baton up. I think this is a gap that I'm seeing. Our American cousins also see it, but I think maybe we should do a bit more around it.
Yeah, just for completeness, I know you answered this in the chat, Jeremy, but for the recording that's going up, Michael asked if the vendors, for example, Intel, are wanting to do co-design with us, and you answered emphatically yes.
Oh yes, because and the reason is, Michael, because we already do, and it's so deep that we can't actually talk about it. Just all you can know is that we do. So yeah.
So we're just after 12 noon now, so we should probably draw this to a close. Thank you particularly to Jeremy, who's still here, and Richard, who left a bit earlier on, for agreeing to come on and do this presentation. Thank you for everybody who's joined and engaged and asked questions. It's much appreciated. And I'm sure we'll be seeing lots more from ExCALIBUR over the next wee while, so keep your eyes open for more information coming out. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.